to introduce Joseph Benedict Rodriguez III today. He is a VHI casting technician, an animal lover, and amateur paleontologist, and he is here to talk to you about reptiles.
It's 312 million years ago. We're in the late Carboniferous period, a time of massive killer insects and giant amphibians. When out of an egg hatches a new kind of animal, one that's small and scaly, seemingly insignificant. This is the earliest known reptile. In just a few million years, these little reptiles will be taking over the world. Just a few million years later, reptiles expand into two separate clades, synapsids and sauropsids. Synapsids eventually turn into mammals, and these are your mammal-like reptiles, animals like Dimetrodon and Gorgonopsids and Edaphosaurus at this time. While the true reptiles were still small, living in the shadows of their living in the shadows of their larger when the Permian came to an end during the greatest mass extinction of all time. Maybe you guys shouldn't be so close to each other. Now, after the greatest mass extinction event in this history, the Great Dying, into the Permian period.
You love your speech?
She was quiet all morning. Now becomes the true reptiles' time to shine. Welcome to the age of reptiles, the Mesozoic. Reptile diversity exploded during the Mesozoic. With dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and the giant sea reptiles of the day ruling the land, air, and water. But the reptiles of today got their start in this period. In front of you now are all the reptiles are the living reptiles of today. We have lizards, turtles, the tuatara, that's a baby dragon, snakes, and the birds. They're all combined, there are over 20,000 known species of reptile alive today, if you include birds as reptiles. So, we like to say that dinosaurs all went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period, 66 million years ago. But right here in front of you, there is a dinosaur. If you listen to Alex's talk earlier, you might know the answer to that. Does anyone know which of these animals is the dinosaur? Anyone? The answer is the birds. Birds are dinosaurs, and in turn, dinosaurs are reptiles. They all belong to the group of reptiles called the archosaurs. So the archosaurs, the earliest archosaurs show up in the fossil record about 240 plus million years ago in the beginning of the Triassic period. While the first earliest birds, the first true birds, don't show up to 150 million years ago in the Jurassic. So the early birds had claws, they had teeth, they had long bony tails, just like dinosaurs did. So when you see a skeleton of a bird and a dinosaur compared to each other, you really see the resemblances. There are currently over 10,000 species of birds worldwide, making dinosaurs, these birds, dinosaurs, one of the most abundant animals still on this planet to this day. You see there's so many different ranges of sizes, shapes, colors of birds. Birds live on land, they live in the sea, they live in the air. Birds, dinosaurs rule this planet still. But it's not about birds. Alex talked about them plenty earlier. So we're going to go on to their next closest living relative. Oh, I'm missing an alligator scroll. The next closest living relative is the crocodilians. They're the most fearsome of all the living reptiles. The largest living reptile today is the saltwater crocodile. This thing gets up to 23 feet long, over a ton at their maximum size. This is a giant apex predator, but it pales in comparison to some of its prehistoric ancestors. We have representations of a couple of them behind you there. Stop moving, you not to Atara. You have Deinosuchus, Sarcosuchus, and Purosaurus. These are just some of the many large crocodilians that once lived on this planet. These animals were so large they could turn even dinosaurs into snacks. The earliest ancestors of I missed it. The earliest ancestors of crocodilians dates back over 240 million years. But there's a common misconception that crocodilians haven't changed much in that time, when in reality, these animals used to come in all different varieties and shapes. From the very ancient pseudosuchians, that somewhat resemble dinosaurs, and some of them even be confused for dinosaurs. Or the very odd herbivore dinosaurs that have a pug face like Sinosuchus. Or Dilophosaurus, which looks a lot like a mosasaur. Or the high walking, galloping crocodilians like Caprosuchus. Today, there are only 28 known species of crocodilian left on the planet, and they live on 5 different continents. They're one of the least widespread and least common of all the reptiles on the planet. But every ecosystem they appear in, they are the apex predator. Next we have turtles, and turtles are weird. Of all the living reptiles, turtles are the most confusing. At first, throughout history, they have been classified as so many different things. At first, they were thought to be the last living anapsid reptiles. Reptiles that only have one hole in their skull just for their eyes, and they're behind the head. But later on, they were thought to be diapsids, who just reverted back to that anapsid style skull shape. After that discussion was over, there's always debates over whether turtles belong in Archosauria, with dinosaurs, birds, crocodilians, pterosaurs, or if they belong in Lepidosaurs with lizards and snakes. Or if they go on their own third offset group. The science on turtles is always changing, so let's just say turtles are weird, just leave it at that. Unlike a lot of reptiles, turtles have a fairly extensive fossil record, mostly due to their shells. Their shells being so thick, they fossilize very easily. The oldest known turtle fossils date back to 260 million years ago, making them some of the oldest known true reptiles on Earth. But the largest known turtle to ever live is right above me here. It's Archelon. It was discovered right here in South Dakota. It lived in the inland sea that once covered the inner part of the United States. The current largest living turtle today is also a sea turtle. It's the leatherback sea turtle. Well, not as big as the Archelon, it can still get up to 1,000 pounds. Between sea turtles, tortoises, freshwater turtles, and terrapins, there are over 350 species of turtles alive today. They live everywhere on the planet except for the North and South Pole. Our last different types of reptiles are all fairly closely related. They all belong to the group Lepidosauria. The most ancient of this group and most rare of this group are the rhynchocephalians, which this bearded dragon is supposed to represent. not a rhynchocephalian. Today, only one rhynchocephalian still exists. It's the tuatara. At first, the tuatara just looks like a lizard, but in reality, there's something different. They enjoy living in colder environments than lizards do. Their jaw structure is very different from a lizard. They have 2 rows of teeth in the upper part of their mouth and a single row on the bottom, making their mouths more like scissors than lizards are. They also have a slight little beak in the front of their face, which you can see right here in the skull. They also have single-chambered lungs, more similar to that of the air bladder in a fish. They also have weird vertebrae. The vertebra on a tuatara more resembles vertebra in fish and amphibians than it does in lizards. Another key part that's always mentioned in tuataras is that they have a third eye, the parietal eye, which I don't know why it's always made such a big deal of tuataras having that, because most lizards have that as well. You can see that really clearly on this bearded dragon here. If you look really closely, it's right here, it's their third eye. So I don't know why it's always a big deal about tuataras having a third eye. And you can barely even see it in the picture. It's very, very faint. It's more obvious when they're juveniles. As they grow older, it disappears more and turns more into how that looks there. The rhynchocephalian reptiles used to be very widespread. In the early days of the Mesozoic, these guys were everywhere. They were the main lizard-like animals on Earth. But as the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous came along, true lizards started to outcompete them, because lizards are better at being lizards than rhynchocephalians were. So by the time the Cenozoic arrived, the rhynchocephalians were very, very scarce. The last one being the tuatara, only now living on the island of New Zealand. Now, the lizard fossil record is fairly sparse, because lizards are fairly small animals, and small animals their fossils are pretty hard to find because they're so small. Until recently, it was thought that lizards didn't appear until the Jurassic period, but a fairly recent discovery of early lizards named Megasurella, I don't know if I pronounced that right, from the early Triassic, pushed lizard evolution back 75 million years older than previous thought. They were fairly rare in most environments during the Triassic, Jurassic. It wasn't until during the Cretaceous that their numbers started to explode. They became the most abundant of all the reptiles besides the birds. Today, there are over 7,000 species of lizard of all shapes, sizes, and colors living on this planet today. You see here the skinks and gommids, and monitors, iguanas, geckos. There's so many different types of lizards in our lives today. They come in all shapes and sizes, from the less than around a half-inch long nano-chameleons, and the just slightly larger than that dwarf gecko, to the over 10-foot Komodo dragon. With the largest true lizard of all time being Varanus priscus, the megalania from Australia, which went extinct just 40,000 years ago, and probably would have preyed on early humans in Australia. But another closely relative of lizards that got even bigger than megalania were mosasaurs. Mosasaurs are the largest squamate reptiles ever lived. Mosasaurs is the skull right behind me here. You have one in the front of the museum up there. These are giant apex predators of the oceans. These guys ruled the Cretaceous seas, and they are very close to the monitor lizards. Now, the oldest known lizards currently are geckos and skinks, but monitors and iguanas also have fairly ancient origins as well. Lizards live on every continent besides Antarctica, and live everywhere on Earth besides the north, only the coldest regions of the planet. But evolving from the lizards is their squamate relative, their legless squamate relative, the snake, represented here, and a little milk snake who's sleeping in this little ball. The snakes are the youngest of all the reptiles, having only first appeared during the Jurassic period, 167 million years ago. The earliest known snake, as far as I could find, was Eophis underwoodi, but there are also very early snakes like Parvoraptor and Diablo die or something like that. But these early snakes still had 4 legs. The first legless snakes wouldn't appear until 82 million years later in the late Cretaceous period. There are other animals alive on Earth today, other lizards, in fact, that don't have legs, and people might confuse them for a snake. But there are very key characteristics of snakes that these animals lack. And this guy here is not a snake. This guy's not a snake. You don't mix them up. Do you know what makes these guys not a snake? Any idea?
Eyelids.
Huh?
That's one of the features, like eyelids.
Yes. Snakes don't have eyelids. Snakes cannot blink their eyes. Cannot close their eyes. Snakes also have really short tails compared to their body. While legless lizards, which these guys are, tend to have really long tails and shorter bodies, while snakes have shorter necks, shorter tails, long bodies. Another key feature of snakes is that they have no visible ears. You cannot see ears on a snake, while you can on a legless lizard. There are over 3,000 species of snakes alive today, living on most of the planet, except for the poles, except for snakes that also even live in most of the world's oceans, besides the Atlantic. They're absent from the Atlantic. With the largest living snakes being the around 23-foot long reticulated python, or the around 20-foot long and 500-pound green anaconda from the Amazon. With the smallest snake on Earth currently being the Barbados thread snake, which is less than 4 inches long. While the biggest snake of all time would have been the Titanoboa, a snake so long, as long as a school bus. It absolutely dwarfed the giant snakes of today, being up to 42 feet long and 1.5 tons. This snake lived 60 million years ago, and it was one of the largest animals to appear up to that point since the death of the dinosaurs 6 million years earlier. A lot of people on Earth are afraid of snakes. It's mostly due to their venom. A lot of people are afraid of the venoms that snakes possess, but only 10 to 15% of snakes on Earth possess venom, and even less than that are actually able to even harm a person. You always see signs like this, this means a venomous snake, and this is a non-venomous snake. And that really only works in places like Arizona or other parts of the US. Because if you go anywhere else in the world, and you have the non-poisonous is what they put on here, non-venomous snakes. Look, you go to Australia, the eastern ground snake is the second most venomous snake on the planet. And it has those round pupils, and it has that round head, not a triangle head like vipers do. Versus, a python, which has slit pupils and a more triangular shaped head. It all varies. The point about snakes is if you go out and you see a snake and you don't know exactly what it is, just don't touch it, because if you don't know. Stop it. So reptiles have been on this planet for 312 million years, and since then have grown to be some of the most successful animals alive today. There are currently over 20,000 species of these reptiles on Earth today. The turtles, the lizards, the snakes, birds, the single tuatara, and the crocodilians. The rules of dinosaurs might have ended, but the age of the reptile still lives on. Any questions? Questions? What, anything, Chris?
Earlier, Alex talked about air in the bones, like birds have that. Do any of those have air to help them weigh less or whatever? Does it help for buoyancy in the water, or?
I don't believe most reptiles have.
So crocodilians, some crocodilians have pretty hollow bones. They don't have a system of air sacs quite like birds, but they have sort of the beginnings of a system of air sacs.
That makes sense because crocodilians are close relatives of dinosaurs and birds,
Right.
rather than lizards and stuff, which are very distantly related to those animals. Any other questions?
No. How do you tell the difference between a snake's body and its tail?
So, basically, when you pick a snake up and you look, see if this guy, he's kind of wiggly, so he might not want me to do that to him. But if I can get this open. Where their cloaca is, if you guys know what a cloaca, I can explain what a cloaca is if anyone wants to know. His tail starts right here where my fingers are. Because that's where his cloaca is. That's where the snake's pelvis would be if they still had one. That's where their tails start, is right after the cloaca. On males and female snakes, the tails are different lengths. The cloaca is in slightly different spots, or how, but for the most part, snakes have much shorter tails.
They don't have, I'm not sure this is correct. Do they have ribs? They don't have ribs on their tail.
If you look at a skeleton of a snake, then there's no ribs in the tail. So it's even more obvious to see when you look at a skeleton. But a live snake, the only way really to see their tail is by picking them up and looking where their cloaca is.
Do all reptiles lay eggs, or do they have live birth?
It goes back and forth. More common. So as far as we know of, all archosaurs lay eggs. All birds, all crocodilians, they all lay eggs. All turtles also lay eggs. Lizards and snakes go back and forth. There's almost as many live birth-giving snakes as there are egg-laying snakes. And lizards, the most commonly known live birth-giving lizards are the skinks. A lot of skinks give birth to their young, and some skinks even raise their young, which is a really rare occurrence in reptiles, besides birds and somewhat crocodilians. Most lizards would see their young as food, while skinks would see them more as, or would actually raise them and try to, the mother and father skinks actually stick together and mate for life. Some species, not all species. Some, like the shingleback snake, for example. You had a question back there?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, for the White River group in South Carolina, there's lots of turtles.
Lots of turtles.
Are there other types of reptiles that come out of those formations?
It's a perfect question. So just last summer, I was out there with Pete and Matt right here, and there's a lizard there called a Paleozoic. You can actually see the Paleozoic skulls in the case, in the White River case behind you there, and that's a fairly decent sized lizard. I mean, its skull was that big, so probably a pretty decent sized lizard. I'm sure there's other reptiles there that I'm also excluding, but
So there's a big lizard called Glyptosaurus, which is quite rare. We don't have one in this museum yet. I'm hoping to get one someday. There's a limbless lizard called Rhinera hatcheri, and the skull is about half an inch long.
that's a
So it's
little
a little tiny thing. Bob, in fact, found a really nice Rhinera hatcheri skull, as my first ex-wife had. Denny found a really nice little Rhinera hatcheri skull as well. And there's also at least, I think there are 2 different snakes, and I don't remember their names, but
yeah.
2 different snakes have been found. We have one that we found at the place where you were down Bordy's, where we collect the white roof stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, reptiles have always been fairly abundant ever since they first appeared in the Jurassic. Mostly from the Jurassic on, you see reptiles in almost every formation on Earth, unless it was a polar formation. Because they need heat to survive. Any other questions? Anything? I can ask a question about the live animals too. No?
What do your lizards eat?
Depends on the lizard. He's an omnivore, so he eats both animals, plants. He likes chicken eggs a whole bunch. He's really sleepy right now today. This is Raptor. Bearded dragons are also omnivores. They eat more plants and insects and very small mammals. Like very occasionally they can eat a small mammal like a small mouse, but more often it's insects and plants. Turtles are weird. they eat, turtles. These turtles especially, my pet turtles specifically are extra weird. They won't eat anything that's alive. They will eat animals, but they will wait till the animals die and then they will eat them. They're weird turtles. But turtles, very these guys, they eat animals, they eat insects, they also eat plants. And then snakes are strictly carnivores. There's no such thing as a vegetarian snake. And that's not my bird, but I'm sure he eats bird seed.
So, do all reptiles share the crocodilian habit of horking down lunch, and then say half a zebra or a chicken or a fox kitten, and then they don't have to eat again for several months?
So reptiles have very, very slow metabolisms, so it takes a long time to metabolize their food. So technically, yeah, I could feed this guy a couple chickens, a couple baby chicks, and if he didn't eat for the next 6 months, he'd probably be alive, he'd be okay. He probably might lose a little bit of weight. Birds, on the other hand, birds have a really fast metabolism, so they have to eat constantly, and that's why they're constantly pooping and because they're constantly eating. But yeah, there's other reptiles other reptiles can go a long period of time without food, especially so milk snakes have higher metabolisms than like a python. But these big pythons, a lot of times they only eat once a year. They'll go catch a deer and eat that, and then not eat again until they have another chance. All right.
Thank you, Joey.